It's that time again where we talk about couch co-op horror games. I've always been a huge fan of horror games, but when it comes to local co-op horror gaming, these games are pretty difficult to come by. So in this video, I'm going to talk about new and upcoming local co-op horror games. And before we get started, just know, not all these games are recommendations. They just exist, and some of them are good, some of them are not good. Let's start with the games that came out in 2024. Speaking of not so good games, have you ever heard of Unbearable? This is a fully 3D survival horror co-op game. You can play through the entire game in split screen co-op. It's clearly an homage to games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Unfortunately, it still has some bugs, and overall the game's just pretty janky, but it still has some charm here. Like the AI generated voiceovers are kind of funny. I don't know, I might have a higher tolerance for janky gameplay as I'm used to playing early 3D games from the PS1 and N64. So even though this game is not great, I still enjoyed it. And I've been following it for quite a while. I played it when it was first in early access, and now the full release just came out in 2024. Would I recommend this? Absolutely not. If you have a friend that has a lot of patience, maybe you will have some fun with this one. The original Night Slashers is one of my favorite old school arcade beat 'em ups, and I have covered it a few times on this channel. Well, recently, there has been a remake of Night Slashers. Unfortunately, it has not been favorably reviewed, but one benefit it has over the original game is that now you can play it in 4-player co-op, when the original had just 3-player. So that's cool. You're also able to choose the new soundtrack with remixed songs or the original arcade soundtrack. It's always nice to have those options. But unfortunately, the visuals here are greatly lacking. It just looks like a really low budget game. And there's still some glitches here and there, so it definitely could have used more polish. But if you are a fan of the original game, I still think it's worth trying out. Just lower your expectations. And if you're only going to play one or the other, definitely just play the original one. But if you want to play a really good horror-themed beat 'em up, you should try Fist Hell. This is one of the games in UFO 50, which is a collection of 50 8-bit style games. And this is one of my favorites from the collection. You can play it in 2-player co-op, and it's actually a really solid beat 'em up. The enemies you're going to fight here are a lot of zombies, aliens, and other monsters. It has just the right amount of gore and violence and action. I love that you can knock off the zombies' heads and other limbs and pick them up as weapons. And there are constantly weapons that you can pick up and use. A lot of the modern beat 'em ups that we get are usually more of an homage to the 16-bit era and the arcade era. We don't get a lot of them that are focused more on the 8-bit style. So that's kind of a breath of fresh air. The old school games that are most similar to this one that I can think of are River City Ransom and Mighty Final Fight. Overall, this is an excellent beat 'em up. It's definitely worth trying out. And while you're at it, try all the other games on UFO 50 as well. There are a handful of really good co-op games in that collection. The Last Stand of Camp Zombie. This is a pretty straightforward twin-stick shooter with some roguelite elements. Basically, it's like an arena. You're gonna have hordes of zombies coming at you wave by wave, and you wanna just survive by picking up weapons and taking out each wave. Once you complete that, you have a little bit of time to gather some more resources and prepare for the next wave. The gameplay here is pretty shallow. It doesn't really add anything new, but what it does pretty well. I also really like the art style here. It kind of has like a hand-drawn comic book style. Overall, there's nothing special here, but it is a solid twin-stick shooter. Until the Last Bullet. This one is kind of an interesting game. I just bought it on a whim because it's a pretty cheap game. Let me get this out of the way. It's not good. This is basically a modern full motion video game, or FMV. There's live action story here, and it's all in Russian, so you'll have to read the subtitles. When the gameplay actually starts, it turns into basically like a gallery shooter. Unfortunately, without light guns, you just move cursors around and shoot the live action actors as they come towards the screen. And it gets pretty boring and repetitive pretty quick. I was hoping that this game would be one of those things where it's just so bad that it's good, but unfortunately it's kind of just bad. There's not a lot of redeemable qualities here. The acting's not even like over the top enough for it to be laughable. It all just kind of exists, and so I definitely don't recommend this one. But one game that I do highly recommend that came out in 2024 is Perennial Order. But there is a caveat. This is a Souls-like, so that means it's incredibly difficult. You can play through the entire game in 2-player co-op, but instead of most Souls-likes that are fully 3D, this one plays more like a top-down dungeon crawler type of game, kind of like a Diablo. But what makes this so difficult is you only have one hit and then you're dead. So yeah, it's definitely one of those games where you have to get good. That being said, I love the art style here, and I just love the dark nature of the game. It's not necessarily a full-blown horror experience, but I am including it because it has a very creepy atmosphere. And the other thing about this game, it's all bosses. There's no enemies in between. So kind of like Shadow of the Colossus. Between bosses, you just explore and pick up items, and you go to towns and stuff like that. But the main focus is the boss fights, and they're really cool. Each boss has their own unique art style and patterns that you're gonna have to learn and master in order to defeat them. The second boss that we played in this game, it took us probably 45 minutes to beat him. We died countless times. So like I was saying, I do highly recommend this game. It's a great game, but it's very difficult, so just keep that in mind. So those are all of the co-op games from 2024 that have some horror themes. So now let's talk about the upcoming horror games. Most of these are probably going to be coming out in 2025 or later. Let's start with Dead Pixels 2. The original Dead Pixels was a pretty solid run and gun shooter with a zombie theme. This one seems to be more of the same, but this one has 4-player co-op gameplay, so that's a great addition. And this one seems to be really leaning into the retro aspect of the game. The subtitle of the game is straight to video. There's a VHS filter that they can add to give you more of that lo-fi look. So you could probably expect a lot of B-movie and old tech references. There's still no release date for this one yet. Demons Ate My Neighbors is a clear homage to Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Obviously, it looks to have the same top-down, run-and-gun shooting exploration type of gameplay with a horror setting, but this one also includes some roguelite elements. I really like the pixel art style here. The characters look nice, and some of the boss fights look really cool too. And this is another one that does not have a release date yet. Now let's talk about Flora and Fang. This is a single-screen platformer, so similar to games like Bubble Bobble, Snow Bros, games like that. The characters that you play are cute little vampires. In this one you have guns, and it looks like you're able to upgrade them. There is a demo available for this on Steam right now, and this one looks like it's coming out in 2025 sometime. While we're talking about cute horror-themed games, I wanted to mention Haunted Paws. This is described as a cozy co-op horror game, so I'm guessing it's probably appropriate to play with kids. You play as these 2 puppies in split screen, and you have to work together to explore the environment and solve puzzles. This is one that I'm actually really looking forward to. What looks to be another family-friendly horror-themed game is Begone Beast. It's a top-down action game for 1 to 4 players. Even though this one looks pretty cute, I really like the art style here, and the art style does look to have a creepy atmosphere. There's no release date for this one yet either. Ammo and Oxygen. This is another top-down roguelike shooter with some survival elements. This one looks like it could be played with up to 4 players, and the settings seem to be in spaceships and various different planets, where you're going to come across lots of aliens and other types of monsters. And this one is supposed to come out sometime in 2024. Now, one of the games that I'm most excited for is Umbilical. This one is described as a Metroidvania-inspired top-down shooter with some survival horror elements. Now, this is one that definitely actually looks creepy. The atmosphere is really dark, where it really leans heavy into a creepy isolation type of feel. And I did read that this is going to have a really unique co-op feature, where one player plays as the main protagonist, and the other player plays as the actual umbilical cord. And you got to work together to navigate through the environment. I hope that that's still included, as the Steam listing says that it's only single player, and there is no release date for this yet. And now for my most anticipated horror game, I want to talk about Reanimal. This is basically everything that I'd want in a horror game. This was created by the team that made Little Nightmares 1 and 2. Little Nightmares 3 is coming out, and it actually is including co-op, but it's only online co-op. So that's the only reason why I'm not talking about that game. But this seems to have very similar gameplay to those first two Little Nightmare games, but the whole game can be played in local co-op. The one thing that I love about those games is they're all about the atmosphere and setting. There's little to no dialogue in any of those games, and it's able to tell a really compelling story with no words. And that's just really one of my favorite forms of storytelling. Reanimal seems to be continuing that type of theme, but it also has some really creepy looking gameplay here. Not only are the environments creepy, but the monsters look absolutely grotesque and terrifying. And it looks like you and your friend are going to find yourselves in a lot of situations where you're just running away from these huge creepy monsters. So not only is Reanimal one of my most anticipated horror games, it's just one of my most anticipated couch co-op games. I cannot wait for this game. It looks like it's supposed to come out sometime in 2025. So there you go. There are some new and upcoming couch co-op horror games from 2024 and later. And I know that not all these games look great, and most of them don't actually look that scary, but I'm working with what I got, all right? But I do wish that there were more couch co-op horror games that were actually scary. That being said, what are some of your favorite local co-op horror games? And if you enjoyed this video, check out our video from last year where we talked about the top 20 local co-op horror games. Thanks for watching.